I sacrificed my corporate law career to rescue my parents from losing their house, but found out they were hiding $150,000 the entire time, which they gave my sister to invest in her boyfriend's crypto scam, and now they expect me to get their money back. I'm sitting here in my childhood bedroom and I still can't figure out where everything went wrong. I'm 24 years old and I should be starting my career right now, but instead I'm back home dealing with a mess that gets worse every time I learn something new. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood where my dad worked as a building maintenance supervisor and my mom did substitute teaching. We weren't rich, but we had a house and food on the table. I have one younger sister, Hannah, who's 22. Growing up, people always said I was the responsible one. I spent my weekends at the library while Hannah was at cheerleading practice or hanging out with friends. Our parents never made us feel like they had favorites, but looking back now, the patterns were obvious. When Hannah crashed Dad's truck at 17, they paid the deductible and took care of everything. When I needed books for my college prep classes, I worked at the grocery store to buy them myself. I went to state school on a partial scholarship and worked 2 jobs the whole time. My grades were good enough that I started thinking about law school in my junior year. I took the LSAT twice and got a 172 on the second try. I still remember sitting in the Wendy's parking lot when I got my Columbia Law acceptance email. I called my parents and they were happy but also worried about the cost. I told them I would handle it with loans. That's what you do, right? You invest in yourself and pay it back later. Law school was 3 years of barely sleeping. I graduated with a 3.8 GPA and $200,000 in student debt. The interest alone was going to be around $800 per month once repayment started. I did the math over and over. I needed a job paying at least $180,000 in a big city to make it work. That meant corporate litigation at a firm where I'd bill 2,200 hours a year and have no life, but it was the only path that made sense. In February, I got an interview callback from a firm in Manhattan. The offer came through in March. $185,000 base salary plus bonus. Start date in September. I called my parents and they congratulated me, but they didn't sound as excited as I expected. I figured they were just worried about me moving so far away. Then in April, my parents called and asked me to come home for the weekend. They said they needed to have a serious family conversation. I drove the 4 hours back thinking maybe they wanted to talk about helping them with bills or something. My dad was close to retirement age and I knew their savings probably weren't great. I got home on Saturday morning and both my parents were sitting at the kitchen table with folders and papers spread out everywhere. Hannah wasn't there. Dad looked tired in a way I hadn't seen before. Mom kept folding and unfolding a tissue in her hands. They told me to sit down. Dad started talking. He said they were behind on the mortgage by 3 months. They owed $15,000 in credit card debt across 4 different cards. Mom jumped in and said they had been trying to handle it quietly but they couldn't anymore. The mortgage company had sent a letter saying they were starting foreclosure proceedings if the back payments weren't made by June. I asked them how this happened. Dad said the expenses just kept adding up. Car repairs, medical bills, property taxes going up. Mom said they had been pulling from their 401k early to cover things and now that was empty too. I asked why they didn't tell me sooner. Dad said they didn't want to burden me while I was in law school. Then Mom said something that made my stomach drop. She said they had taken most of their retirement savings to help pay for Hannah's college expenses at the state school nearby. Hannah had changed her major 3 times and taken an extra year to graduate. She had just finished in December. I did the math in my head and realized they had drained everything to keep both of us in school. Dad looked at me and asked if I could defer my job for a year. He said if I could stay home and help them reorganize their finances, maybe work a local job to contribute to the household, they could get back on track. He said once they were stable, I could go take the New York job or find something else. He reminded me that they had sacrificed everything so I could go to law school in the first place. I sat there looking at the foreclosure letter. I thought about them losing the house they'd owned for 26 years. I thought about my mom crying. I called the firm on Monday and told them I needed to decline the offer due to family circumstances. The recruiter sounded disappointed but professional. She said to reach out if my situation changed. I took the bar exam in July like I had planned. I spent June studying while also going through every single bill and statement my parents had. The situation was worse than they first told me. They weren't just 3 months behind on the mortgage. They had been making partial payments for over a year and the bank was losing patience. The credit cards had interest rates above 20%. They had taken out a loan against Dad's life insurance policy. I called the mortgage company and negotiated a loan modification. I got them on a payment plan where they had to pay the back amount over 18 months instead of all at once. I negotiated with the credit card companies to lower the interest rates and set up automatic payments. By August, I had everything organized. The crisis seemed manageable if they stuck to the budget I created. I started applying for legal jobs in September. Nothing that paid anywhere near $185,000 but enough to help at home and start making my own loan payments. I was planning to work locally for a year or 2, then try to pivot to a better market. Then Hannah called me in mid-September. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her at first. She said she was in California visiting friends and she had made a huge mistake. She said her friends had gotten her involved in an investment opportunity and now she couldn't get her money back. I asked her how much money we were talking about. She said $50,000. I asked her where she got $50,000. She said mom and dad gave it to her. I hung up and walked into the living room where both my parents were watching TV. I asked them if they had given Hannah $50,000. Dad turned off the TV. Mom started crying again. They admitted they had given Hannah money to invest. I asked where they got $50,000 if they were 3 months behind on the mortgage. Dad said it was from Grandma's inheritance when she passed 2 years ago. I remembered when Grandma died. I asked them why they never mentioned having that money when we talked about the foreclosure in April. Mom said they were keeping it separate for emergencies. I asked them what kind of emergency was more important than losing the house. Dad said Hannah's friend had a business opportunity that promised 30% returns in 6 months. They said if it worked out, they were going to surprise me by paying off a big chunk of my student loans. I asked if they really gave Hannah $50,000 to invest based on a promise from her friends. Mom said it was actually $150,000 total. I had to sit down. I asked them to repeat that number. Dad confirmed they had $150,000 in cash between the inheritance, the life insurance loan, and some retirement funds they had hidden in a separate account. I asked why they made me turn down a $185,000 job and spend my summer fixing their finances when they had $150,000 sitting there the whole time. Mom said they wanted to make the investment work before telling me because they wanted to surprise me with good news. Hannah called again later that night. She said the investment was some kind of green energy cryptocurrency project and the website had gone down. She said her friends couldn't reach the people who ran it. I asked her if she had any paperwork or contracts. She said everything was done through an app that was no longer working. I asked her who these friends were. She admitted it was actually her boyfriend and some guys he knew from Orange County. I looked up the company name she gave me. There were already news articles about it being investigated as a scam. Multiple people across 3 states had lost money. The website and app had disappeared overnight. I called Hannah back and told her the money was gone. She started crying again and said the boyfriend promised it was legitimate. My parents asked me to help them get the money back. Dad said I had just passed the bar exam so I should know how to handle this. I explained that I had zero experience in securities fraud and even if I did, the money was likely never invested in anything real to begin with. These kinds of scams usually just move money between accounts until it ends up overseas. I told them they needed to file a police report and report it to the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center. Mom asked if I could at least try to sue somebody. I told her I didn't have a law license yet in any state and even if I did, I couldn't represent family members in a case where I was this personally affected by the outcome. Dad said I was being selfish and just wanted to blame them instead of help. I left the room because I didn't know what else to say. The next few weeks were tense. Hannah came home from California and moved back into her old room. She said her boyfriend had gone silent and blocked her number. She also admitted she had put $25,000 of her own money into the scheme using credit cards and personal loans. So now she was in debt too. I kept applying for jobs. I had some interviews but nothing concrete. The whole house felt like it was suffocating. Dad barely spoke to me. Mom kept asking if I had thought of any way to get the money back. Hannah spent most of her time in her room. Then in early October, 2 FBI agents knocked on our door. They said they were investigating the company Hannah had invested in. It was part of a larger case involving multiple states and several $1 million. They asked to speak with Hannah and my parents separately. They took statements and said the investigation was ongoing. They told my parents not to expect any money back anytime soon and possibly never. After the agents left, Dad asked me again if there was any legal action we could take. I told him the FBI said it could be years before they even identified who was really behind it, if they ever did. He asked about bankruptcy. I explained that bankruptcy wouldn't help them recover the lost money, it would just discharge some of their other debts. But if the FBI eventually did recover assets, bankruptcy could complicate their claim to any recovered funds. They were stuck in limbo. The mortgage company started sending letters again. The modification I had negotiated was based on them having income to make the payments. Now with Dad approaching retirement and their savings gone, they were falling behind again. The bank gave them a 30-day notice that they would proceed with foreclosure if the account wasn't brought current. I was drowning. I started reaching out to every recruiter I had contacts with, asking about positions that could start in January instead of waiting until next fall. I needed to get out. I needed to start my own life. Update 1: I need to update this because the situation somehow got even more complicated. After I made the original post, things were still tense at home but stable in the sense that nothing new had exploded. I was interviewing for jobs and trying to avoid my family as much as possible while living under the same roof. About 2 weeks after the FBI visit, Hannah got a call from her ex-boyfriend. The one who had gotten her into the investment scheme. He called from a number she didn't recognize and told her he was in Mexico. He said he had been scammed too and he was trying to get their money back. He told her not to cooperate with the FBI because it would make things harder. Hannah recorded the call on her phone and didn't know what to do with it. I told her to contact the FBI agent who had interviewed her and let them know about the call. She did, and the agent told her that was likely a form of witness intimidation and they would look into it. The agent said the ex-boyfriend's story about being in Mexico was probably not true and he was likely still in California or had moved somewhere else in the US. They told Hannah not to respond if he contacted her again. 2 days after Hannah reported the call, the FBI agent called back and said they wanted to interview her again. They asked her more detailed questions about the ex-boyfriend and the other people involved in recruiting investors. Hannah admitted that she had met some of them at parties and had even gone to a presentation at a hotel conference room where they showed slideshows about the returns. The agent asked if she could identify any of the people in photos they showed her. She identified 3 people including the ex-boyfriend. After the interview, Hannah came home and told my parents everything. She said the FBI agent told her she might have to testify if the case went to trial. She said she might get a subpoena. My parents didn't say anything for a while. Then Dad said this whole thing had gotten out of control and it was Hannah's fault for trusting people she barely knew. Hannah started crying and went to her room. Around the same time, I got a call back from a firm in a mid-sized city about 3 hours away. They wanted me to come in for a final interview. The position was corporate litigation, similar to what I had trained for. The salary was $155,000, which was less than the New York offer but still good. I drove out there for the interview and it went well. They said they would let me know within a week. I didn't tell my parents about the interview. I figured there was no point unless I actually got an offer. But Dad found the printed directions to the firm's office in my car when he borrowed it to run an errand. He asked me about it at dinner that night. I told him it was a job interview. He asked where. I said it was in another city and I was waiting to hear back. Mom asked if that meant I was planning to leave. I said yes, if I got the offer. Dad put down his fork and said he couldn't believe I was abandoning them when they needed help the most. I reminded him that I had already given up one job to help them and it turned out the financial crisis could have been solved immediately if they had just used the money they were hiding from me. He said that wasn't fair because they were trying to do something good with that money. I asked him if losing $150,000 in a scam counted as something good. Mom started crying. Hannah stayed quiet. I finished eating and went to my room. The next morning, Dad knocked on my door and said he wanted to talk. He apologized for what he said at dinner but then said he still thought I should stay at least until they figured out the foreclosure situation. I told him I couldn't put my life on hold indefinitely. He said 6 more months wouldn't kill me. I didn't respond. The job offer came through 3 days later. They wanted me to start in January. I accepted and signed the paperwork. I told my parents that night. Dad didn't say anything. Mom asked if I had really thought this through. I said I had been thinking about it for months. Then something unexpected happened. My dad's older brother, who I'll call Uncle Ray, showed up at the house unannounced. Uncle Ray lives in Arizona and runs a construction business that he built from nothing. He's in his early 60s and hasn't been back to our state in probably 5 years. He and my dad talk on the phone maybe twice a year. Uncle Ray said he saw our family name in a local news article about the FBI investigation. Apparently one of the articles mentioned the dollar amounts and some of the victims' names including my parents. He said he got on a plane the next day. He showed up at our door with a duffel bag and said he was staying for a few days to figure out what was going on. My parents explained everything to him. The mortgage trouble, the hidden money, the investment scam, the FBI investigation, all of it. Uncle Ray listened without interrupting. When they finished, he asked them if they had any plan to get out of this mess. Dad said they were waiting to hear from the FBI about asset recovery. Uncle Ray asked how long that might take. Dad admitted it could be years or never. Uncle Ray looked at me and asked why I was still living at home. I told him I had just accepted a job starting in January. He asked what I had been doing for the last 8 months. I explained the whole situation with turning down the New York job and spending the summer fixing their finances only to find out they had money the whole time. Uncle Ray shook his head. He told my parents he would give them a loan to save the house, but there were conditions. First, the loan would be $60,000, which was enough to pay off the credit cards and bring the mortgage current. Second, it would be 0 interest but they had to pay him back $1,000 per month starting in 6 months. Third, I had to leave and they were not allowed to ask me for financial help anymore. Fourth, Hannah had to get a job within 30 days or start paying rent to live at home. My parents tried to argue. Dad said they didn't need charity. Uncle Ray said it wasn't charity, it was a loan with clear terms and if they didn't like it they could figure it out themselves. Mom said it wasn't right to force me to leave. Uncle Ray said I had already given up enough and they had taken advantage of me. Dad and Uncle Ray got into an argument about how Dad had raised his family and made his choices. Uncle Ray said the choices were clearly not working out. Hannah tried to defend our parents and Uncle Ray told her she had been enabled her whole life and needed to face consequences for once. The whole dinner table was a mess. By the end of the night, my parents accepted Uncle Ray's offer. They didn't have much choice. The alternative was foreclosure. Uncle Ray wrote them a check the next morning and made them sign a promissory note he had printed at the hotel business center. Then he pulled me aside and said he would help me with my student loan payments for the first 2 years as long as I promised to stay away from this mess and focus on my career. He said to consider it an investment in the only person in the family who seemed to learn from mistakes. I thanked him. He flew back to Arizona 2 days later. The house felt different after he left. My parents weren't talking to me much, but the immediate crisis was over. Hannah started applying for jobs. I started packing my things to move in January. Update 2: I'm writing this from my new apartment. I moved in January and started the job. It's been about 10 weeks now. The work is demanding, but I expected that. I'm finally making progress on my loans. Uncle Ray has been sending me $1,000 per month like he promised, and I've been putting everything extra toward the highest interest loans. It's the first time in my life I've felt like I had some control over my finances. Things with my family have been minimal. I talk to my mom on the phone maybe once every 2 weeks. The conversations are short and surface level. She tells me about the weather and asks if I'm eating enough. I ask if they're keeping up with Uncle Ray's payment plan. She says they are. Dad hasn't called me once since I moved. Hannah texts me occasionally, but I usually don't respond. I don't have much to say to her. In February, Hannah got subpoenaed to testify before a grand jury in California. Mom called me crying about it and asked if I could go with Hannah for support. I said no. I told her Hannah was an adult and needed to handle her own legal obligations. Mom said I was being cold. I didn't argue. Hannah ended up flying to California by herself and testified. She called me afterwards and said it was one of the worst days of her life. She said the prosecutors asked her detailed questions about everyone she met and everything she remembered about the presentation and the promises that were made. I listened but didn't offer much commentary. A few weeks after that, the FBI called my parents with an update. They had arrested 4 people, including Hannah's ex-boyfriend. He wasn't in Mexico after all. He had been hiding at his parents' house in Nevada. The investigation had identified about $8 million in total fraud, but they had only recovered around $400,000 in assets so far. The agent told my parents that even if more assets were recovered, it would be divided among hundreds of victims and the process would take at least 2 to 3 years. My parents might eventually see a small percentage of their money back, but it wouldn't be anything close to the full amount. Dad called me after they got that news. It was the first time I had heard his voice since I moved. He said he wanted to apologize for how everything went down. He said he knew they had made mistakes and he understood why I needed to leave. He said he hoped someday I would forgive them. I told him I wasn't angry anymore, but I also wasn't ready to pretend everything was fine. He said he understood. We haven't talked since then. Hannah got a job at a retail store in March. She's making about $15 per hour working full-time. Mom told me Hannah is paying $400 per month in rent at home now, which was another one of Uncle Ray's conditions. Hannah is also trying to pay down her credit cards, but with her income it's going very slowly. She asked me in a text if I could lend her money. I said no. She didn't respond after that. I got an email from Uncle Ray last week. He said my parents had made their first payment to him on time and he was glad to hear I was doing well at my job. He said he might be in my city for business in a few months and wanted to get dinner if I was available. I wrote back and said I would like that. It's strange that the person I feel most comfortable with in my family is someone I barely knew growing up. My mom asked me in our last phone call if I was planning to come home for a visit anytime soon. I said I didn't have any vacation days available yet. She said she missed me. I told her I needed to go because I had work to do. I don't know when I'll go back. Maybe for a major holiday eventually, but not anytime soon. Update 3: It's been over a year since I turned down the New York job. I'm writing this final update because some people have messaged me asking how things turned out, and also because there have been a few more developments worth mentioning. My job is going well. I made it through my first annual review and got positive feedback. My student loans are slowly going down. Uncle Ray is still helping with monthly payments and I've been aggressive about paying extra whenever I can. At this rate, I might have them paid off in 8 years instead of the original 20. That feels like progress. I went home for one weekend in May. It was my dad's 60th birthday and Mom called me multiple times asking me to come. I drove home on Saturday morning and left Sunday afternoon. The house felt smaller than I remembered. Dad and I shook hands when I arrived. We didn't hug. Hannah was working during most of my visit, so I barely saw her. Dad told me he was officially retiring at the end of the year. His company is offering a small pension and he's going to start collecting Social Security early. Mom is trying to get more consistent work with the school district. They're keeping up with Uncle Ray's loan payments, but they don't have much left over. Dad said they had started using the food bank once a month to help with groceries. He didn't make eye contact when he told me that. Mom made a big dinner on Saturday night. We ate mostly in silence. At one point, Dad said they had received a letter from the FBI saying the criminal trial would probably happen next year and Hannah might have to testify again. He said they were worried about her having to miss work. I didn't offer to help with anything. I just nodded. Before I left on Sunday, Mom asked if I would consider moving back home in a few years once I had more experience and had saved money. She said the city I'm in now is expensive and I could save more living with them. I told her I had no plans to move back. She looked hurt but didn't push it. I found out through Hannah's social media that she started dating someone new. Some guy who works at the same retail store. She posted pictures of them at the mall. I didn't comment or like any of the posts. We haven't texted since she asked me for money back in March. The criminal trial for the people behind the investment scam is scheduled to start in October. Hannah will have to take time off work and fly to California to testify. She asked my parents if they would come with her for support. Dad said he couldn't afford to take time off work before his retirement. Mom said she would try to go if Hannah really needed her. Hannah posted something vague on social media about feeling alone and abandoned but didn't name anyone specifically. I ignored it. Uncle Ray came to my city for business in June like he mentioned. We had dinner at a steakhouse near my office. He asked how I was really doing, not just the surface level stuff. I told him the truth. I said I was doing fine professionally but I didn't feel much connection to my family anymore. He said that was understandable. He said sometimes the best thing you can do for people is let them figure out their own problems. He told me he was proud of me for building my own life. I asked him why he decided to help me when he hadn't been involved with our family for years. He said he saw something in me that reminded him of himself at my age. He said his own family had held him back for a long time until he finally cut ties and focused on building his business. He said he didn't talk to his siblings much for about 10 years while he got his life together. He said eventually some of them came around and respected what he had done. Others never did. He said it was worth it either way. I don't know what the future looks like with my family. I'm not holding any specific grudges at this point. I've just accepted that the relationship probably won't ever be what it could have been. My parents made their choices and I made mine. Hannah is on her own path and I wish her the best from a distance. Uncle Ray is the only one I talk to regularly and that's fine with me. I'm not planning to go home for the holidays this year. I told my mom over the phone last week and she got quiet. She asked if this was permanent. I said I didn't know but I needed more time. She said she understood even though her voice suggested otherwise. Dad didn't call to try to change my mind. I'm not sure if that's because he respects my decision or because he's given up on trying to fix things between us. People have asked me if I regret turning down the New York job. I don't know how to answer that. I can't change what happened and I'm making the best of where I am now. I learned that you can't save people who don't want to be saved. I learned that family loyalty has limits. I learned that sometimes the people who say they love you the most are the ones who will ask you to sacrifice the most without considering what it costs you. I'm doing fine. That's the best way I can describe it. I'm doing fine on my own terms for the first time in my life. Now let's move to the next story. Story 2. My wife demanded I block all our friends because her poem lost at our wedding talent show. She said, "If you loved me, you'd choose me over them." Now she's dating someone new who follows her orders. I, 29M, never thought I'd be writing this kind of post. The short version is that my wife Morgan, 28F, organized a talent showcase at our wedding reception, got upset when her performance wasn't the favorite, and has now completely unraveled our marriage. Here's what happened. Morgan and I met during sophomore year of college. We dated for 6 years before I proposed last year. Throughout our relationship, Morgan always talked about wanting to be a writer. She submitted a collection of short stories to several publishers a few years ago but never got picked up. It was disappointing, but she seemed to move past it and focused on her job at a marketing firm. 3 months before our wedding, Morgan came up with the idea to have a small talent showcase during our reception. She explained that it would be a way to highlight our friends' talents and show how much we valued friendship alongside our marriage. I thought it was a bit unusual, but Morgan was excited about it, so I agreed. She planned to recite a poem she wrote specifically for the event. The theme was going to be about supporting each other while starting a new chapter in life. She invited her college friend Jenna, 28F, to sing an original song. A few other friends from our social circle also prepared performances. I invited my buddy Blake, 30M, to the wedding. Blake works as an accountant but has a home recording setup and makes music as a hobby. He's engaged to be married next year to his longtime girlfriend. The wedding itself went smoothly. The ceremony was beautiful, and the reception started out great. When it came time for the talent showcase, Morgan went first and recited her poem. It was nice, and people clapped appreciatively. Then Jenna performed her song, which was surprisingly good. The crowd seemed to really connect with it, and she received noticeably more applause than Morgan had. A few other friends performed after that. I didn't notice anything wrong until I looked over at Morgan during Jenna's applause. Her face had completely changed. She went from smiling to this cold, hard expression I'd never seen before. For the rest of the reception, she barely spoke to anyone, including me. When I asked if everything was okay, she just nodded and said she was tired. After Jenna's performance, Blake went up to her and complimented her song. I overheard him offering to help her record it properly on his equipment at home. They exchanged phone numbers, which seemed perfectly innocent to me. The day after the wedding, Jenna sent Morgan a text thanking her for organizing the talent show. She mentioned how excited she was about Blake's offer to help record her song and asked if Morgan wanted to get lunch as a thank you. I saw the message on Morgan's phone when she showed it to me with a scowl on her face. Instead of being happy for her friend, Morgan threw her phone on the couch and told me she regretted the whole talent show. Then she demanded that I block Blake on all social media and delete his number from my contacts. I asked her why, and she said he had no business offering to help Jenna with her music. I refused. Blake and I had been friends for years, and he hadn't done anything wrong. I told Morgan she should be happy for Jenna instead of being jealous. That led to our first major argument as a married couple. Morgan accused me of not taking her side and questioned my loyalty to her. The next day, Morgan called up some of our mutual friends from college to complain about Jenna. She described Jenna's thank you text as bragging and said Jenna wouldn't have this opportunity if it weren't for her talent show. When our friends asked to see the actual message, Morgan refused to show it to them. To my surprise, they didn't take her side. They told her she was overreacting and that she should be supportive of Jenna's opportunity. Morgan didn't like that response at all. She told them she didn't want to hang out with any of them for now because they weren't supporting her. This included me, apparently, since I also disagreed with her. 2 of our friends texted me privately to ask if Morgan was okay. They said her behavior seemed completely out of character and they were concerned. I was concerned too. In all our years together, I'd never seen Morgan act this way. I called my dad for advice. At first, he suggested giving Morgan a few days to calm down. The wedding had been stressful, and maybe she just needed time to decompress. But as the days passed and Morgan's fixation on the talent show and Jenna continued, my dad suggested we might need marriage counseling. He pointed out that demanding I cut off friends was an unhealthy way to start a marriage. When I brought up the idea of counseling to Morgan, she immediately shut it down. She said there was nothing wrong with her. According to Morgan, I was the problem because I wouldn't choose her over my friends. In her mind, if I really loved her, I would block Blake without question. As the days went on, Morgan's mood swings got worse. She would suddenly start venting about Jenna in the middle of dinner or while we were watching TV. Then she'd go completely silent for hours. I started to wonder if there might be something medically wrong with her, as this behavior was so different from the woman I'd known for years. When I pressed Morgan about why Jenna's potential music opportunity bothered her so much, she finally admitted it was connected to her failed attempt at publishing her stories. She felt that Jenna was getting an easy break while she had struggled and been rejected. She also blamed me for inviting Blake to the wedding, saying I should have known better than to bring someone who might like Jenna's song. 2 weeks after our wedding, things reached a breaking point. We had planned a honeymoon trip to Hawaii, but Morgan announced she was canceling it. She said she wouldn't go anywhere with me unless I cut off not just Blake, but all of our friends who had sided with Jenna. When I refused again, explaining that isolating ourselves from our support system wasn't healthy, Morgan called me entitled just like Jenna. She packed a bag and said she needed a break because I obviously didn't care about her feelings. Then she left our apartment and went to stay with her parents. She left behind most of her belongings, including her wedding ring on the bathroom counter. I tried calling and texting her multiple times over the next few days, but she didn't respond. I also tried contacting her parents, but they wouldn't answer my calls either. After nearly a week of silence, I talked to my dad again. He suggested that given how quickly and dramatically things had fallen apart, I should consider getting an annulment. He pointed out that Morgan's unreasonable demands, refusal to consider counseling, and now ghosting me were serious red flags that shouldn't be ignored. I sent Morgan one final message asking her to consider joint therapy. I told her I loved her but couldn't agree to cut off our entire social circle. She didn't respond. Then I saw she had posted on Facebook about the wedding. She claimed there's an unwritten rule that the bride should get the most applause at wedding talent shows. She accused the guests of betraying her by cheering louder for Jenna, and me of taking Jenna's side instead of supporting her. At that point, I decided my dad was right. This wasn't the person I thought I had married. Update 1: It's been a month since the wedding, and 2 weeks since my last post. Thank you for all the comments and messages of support. Many of you asked for more details about what happened, so here's where things stand now. After Morgan's Facebook post, I decided to talk to Blake directly about the situation. I wanted to understand exactly what had happened between him and Jenna at the reception, since it was apparently the trigger for all this drama. Blake and his fiancée had come over to our place for football games several times in the months before the wedding. Morgan had always been friendly with them, so her sudden hatred of Blake made no sense. When I explained Morgan's reaction and her demand that I cut him off, Blake was completely baffled. He laughed when I mentioned Morgan's belief that he was giving Jenna some kind of big break in the music industry. Blake clarified that he had only offered to let Jenna use his basic home recording equipment to make a better quality demo of her song. His exact words were that he had a microphone and audio interface in his spare bedroom, and Jenna could come over for dinner with him and his fiancée, then record in their basement. He even suggested she would need to pay someone else for professional mixing, as he was still learning that part himself. This was hardly the career-launching opportunity Morgan had built it up to be in her mind. It was just one friend offering another friend the use of some amateur equipment. A few days after my conversation with Blake, I received a letter from Morgan's parents. They asked me to pack up all of Morgan's belongings and leave them on their front porch on a specific date when they knew I would be at work. They included a set of demands about what should be packed and how, along with a warning not to attempt to see or speak to Morgan during the drop-off. I called my dad again to discuss the situation. He advised me to comply with the request to avoid any further complications, but to keep a detailed inventory of everything I packed. He also recommended I take photos of all the items before delivering them, in case there were any accusations about missing or damaged property later. The letter from Morgan's parents made no mention of our marriage or any plans for the future. It was as if they were helping their daughter move out of an ex-boyfriend's apartment, not dealing with the breakdown of a marriage that was less than a month old. I spent that weekend carefully packing Morgan's clothes, books, and personal items. As I worked, I found things that reminded me of our relationship: concert tickets we'd saved, birthday cards, photos from vacations. None of it matched up with the person who had stormed out of our apartment over a talent show. On the designated day, I dropped off the boxes at her parents' house as requested. I left a note asking Morgan to contact me about our legal situation, but I didn't receive any response. Later that week, I ran into one of our mutual friends at the grocery store. She told me Morgan had been telling people I was abusive because I refused to support her after the wedding. She claimed I had humiliated her by inviting Blake, knowing he would like Jenna's song better than her poem. This accusation floored me. Not only was it completely false, but it was also impossible for me to have known Blake would connect with Jenna's music or offer to help her record it. The whole narrative Morgan was spinning made no logical sense. The friend assured me that no one who knew us believed Morgan's story. In fact, most of our social circle was confused and concerned by her behavior. Several people had tried to talk to her, but she had cut off anyone who questioned her version of events. Another revelation came when I spoke with Jenna for the first time since the wedding. She told me Morgan had sent her a long, angry message accusing her of deliberately trying to upstage her at the wedding. According to Morgan, Jenna had known how important the talent show was to Morgan and had chosen a song specifically designed to get more applause. Jenna was hurt and confused by this accusation. She said Morgan had asked her to participate in the talent show because she was proud of Jenna's songwriting and wanted to showcase it. Jenna had spent weeks practicing her song to make sure it was perfect, as a way of honoring her friendship with Morgan. What struck me most about both of these conversations was how Morgan had completely revised history to make herself the victim. The talent show had been her idea, she had invited the participants, and she had promoted it as a celebration of friendship. Now she was acting as if it had been a competition that Jenna had maliciously won. I consulted with a lawyer about my options. Since we had been married less than a month, an annulment was possible in our state. The lawyer advised me to file the paperwork immediately, before the window for annulment closed. When I filed for annulment, I had to list a reason. I chose fraud because Morgan had essentially misrepresented herself throughout our relationship. The person who walked out of our apartment was not the same person I thought I had married. Morgan was served with the annulment papers at her parents' house. 3 days later, I received a text message from her, the first direct communication since she left. It consisted of just 3 words: "How dare you?" I didn't respond. At this point, any communication between us was best handled through legal channels. Update 2: It's been a month since my last update, and things have taken several unexpected turns. First, Morgan contested the annulment. Her lawyer filed a response claiming that I had abandoned her, not the other way around. According to her filing, she had only gone to her parents' house for a few days to clear her head, and I had used that opportunity to pack up her things, change the locks, and file for annulment without warning. This was completely false. I had the text messages proving she had declared she was taking a break from our marriage. I had witnesses who saw her leave with her bag. I had my phone records showing dozens of unanswered calls to her number. And I certainly never changed the locks. That was pure fabrication. My lawyer assured me that Morgan's claims wouldn't hold up in court, but the legal process would now be more complicated and expensive than I had hoped. Instead of a quick annulment, we were looking at either a contested annulment hearing or converting to a divorce case. While this was happening, Morgan ramped up her campaign against me among our social circle. She created a private Facebook group called Support for Morgan where she posted daily updates about her struggle with me. Someone who was added to the group took screenshots and sent them to me. In these posts, Morgan claimed I had engineered the whole talent show situation to humiliate her. She said I had secretly told people to cheer louder for Jenna. She even suggested that Blake and Jenna had been having an affair before the wedding, and I had known about it. The wildest claim was that I had married her for her family's money, they're middle class, just like my family, and had been looking for an excuse to leave her. According to Morgan, when the talent show didn't give me a reason to leave, I manipulated the situation until she was forced to go to her parents' house, then filed for annulment. None of this made any sense. Why would I spend 6 years in a relationship, plan a wedding, and go through with it, just to manufacture a bizarre talent show scenario to end the marriage 2 weeks later? The most concerning development came when Jenna received a cease and desist letter from a lawyer representing Morgan. The letter accused Jenna of intentional infliction of emotional distress and tortious interference with a marital relationship. It demanded that Jenna stop all contact with Blake and pay Morgan $25,000 for damages to her marriage. Jenna was terrified. She had never been involved in a legal dispute before and didn't know what to do. She forwarded the letter to me, and I immediately sent it to my lawyer. My lawyer confirmed the letter came from a real law firm but said the claims were absurd and unlikely to result in an actual lawsuit. She suspected it was an intimidation tactic rather than a serious legal threat. Nevertheless, she advised Jenna to consult with her own lawyer and keep documentation of all interactions with Morgan. Around this time, I also learned that Morgan had quit her job at the marketing firm. One of her coworkers, who was also a casual friend of ours, told me Morgan had been telling people at work that she needed to leave her job because I was stalking her there. The coworker knew this wasn't true, as I had never once visited Morgan at work, and she was concerned about Morgan's mental state. The final revelation came from Morgan's cousin, who reached out to me privately. She told me Morgan had behaved similarly once before, during their high school years. Morgan had been cast as the lead in the school play, but after receiving lukewarm reviews compared to a supporting actress, she had quit the drama club and spread rumors about the other girl. The cousin had assumed Morgan had matured past that behavior and was shocked to see it resurface. This information, while disturbing, provided some context for Morgan's extreme reaction to the talent show. Perhaps the pressure of the wedding had triggered an old pattern of behavior that had been dormant during our relationship. The annulment hearing was scheduled for the following month. My lawyer advised me to gather all evidence of Morgan's behavior, including screenshots of her Facebook posts, statements from witnesses at the wedding, and testimonials from friends who had observed her behavior afterward. I felt completely drained by the whole situation. What should have been the happy beginning of our married life had turned into a legal and emotional nightmare. Part of me still couldn't believe how quickly and completely things had fallen apart over something as trivial as a talent show. Update 3: The hearing for our annulment took place last week. I wasn't sure if Morgan would actually show up, but she did, accompanied by her parents and her lawyer. This was the first time I had seen her since she walked out of our apartment 2 months ago. She looked completely different. Her hair, which had always been long, was cut short. She was wearing clothes in a style I had never seen her wear before. But the biggest change was in her expression, cold and distant, as if we were strangers. The hearing itself was brief but intense. My lawyer presented the evidence we had gathered, the text messages, witness statements, and documentation of Morgan's behavior after leaving. Morgan's lawyer tried to portray me as controlling and manipulative, claiming I had orchestrated the talent show to embarrass Morgan. The judge seemed skeptical of both narratives and suggested that whatever had happened, it was clear the marriage had broken down irretrievably. She denied the annulment on technical grounds but granted an expedited divorce instead. As we were leaving the courtroom, Morgan approached me in the hallway. For a moment, I thought she might want to talk rationally about what had happened. Instead, she handed me an envelope and walked away without a word. Inside was a handwritten letter. In it, Morgan explained that she had always resented me for being too supportive of other people. She claimed that throughout our relationship, I had consistently paid more attention to our friends' achievements than to hers. The talent show was just the final proof that I didn't prioritize her above everyone else. The letter ended with a statement that she deserved someone who would put her first, always and unconditionally, even when she was wrong. She said she had realized during our separation that I was not that person and never would be. Reading the letter, I finally understood what had happened. Morgan had expected me to validate her anger at Jenna and Blake, regardless of whether it was reasonable. When I didn't, she saw it as a betrayal rather than as normal, healthy behavior. The next day, Blake called to tell me that Jenna had decided to record her song professionally at a small local studio. The whole experience with Morgan had made her more determined to pursue her music, not less. He asked if I wanted to come to the studio to watch the recording session, as several of our friends were going to be there for support. I agreed to go. Being around friends who had stood by me throughout this bizarre situation felt healing. Watching Jenna perform her song, the same one that had somehow triggered the collapse of my marriage, gave me a sense of closure. After the recording session, our friend group went out for dinner. For the first time in months, I spent an evening not thinking about Morgan or the divorce. We talked about normal things, jobs, movies, upcoming trips. It felt like stepping back into regular life. The divorce will be finalized in a few weeks. Fortunately, Morgan and I hadn't combined our finances yet, so the financial separation has been relatively straightforward. The emotional aftermath has been more complicated. I've had to explain to distant relatives and friends why my marriage ended after just 2 weeks. I've dealt with well-meaning people asking if we've tried counseling or suggesting it was just newlywed stress. I've removed and stored all the wedding photos and gifts. Morgan still occasionally posts about me on social media, though less frequently now. According to mutual friends, she's dating someone new already, a guy who apparently agrees with everything she says and has cut off friends at her request. As for me, I'm focusing on rebuilding my life. I moved to a new apartment to get a fresh start. I've reconnected with friends I had somewhat neglected during the wedding planning. I've taken on new projects at work to keep my mind occupied. Sometimes I still can't believe a simple talent show at our wedding reception ended up revealing such a fundamental incompatibility between us. If someone had told me on our wedding day that I would be divorced before the scheduled honeymoon, I would have thought they were joking. But I'm also grateful, in a way. Better to discover this side of Morgan now than years into our marriage, possibly with children involved. And I've learned an important lesson about what I need in a relationship: mutual respect, reasonable expectations, and the freedom to maintain friendships without constant loyalty tests. The talent show might have ended my marriage, but it also prevented me from spending years with someone who had a very different understanding of what marriage should be.